Welcome to the Onward Shift podcast. Today we're fortunate to have Eve with us. Eve, how are you today? How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Vish. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I can't complain. I can't complain. I'd love to know a little bit more about you, what you do, and how you support the construction industry, if that's all right.
Yeah, cool. I'm a quantity surveyor, commercial manager with a background of working for tier one main contractors. And together with my husband, Ricky, I run a consultancy called The Tender Trainers. We teach subcontractors how to tender for work, how to manage their commercials, and basically how to get to final account with profit in the pot.
Amazing. That was a quick summary, which
I've
is
done this a lot in the last 5 years. I've done a lot of quickly trying to explain the elevator pitch.
amazing. So I have never been involved or have any experience with tendering. So,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible you could help me understand what the purpose is, what it achieves, and exactly how to go about even getting involved with something like that? So, I'm an electrician by trade, and I had my own company, but we focus on kind of small residentials. But if I wanted to expand from, let's say, residentials to commercials, how would
Yeah.
I go about even getting my head around the whole tendering process? It sounds so daunting and so confusing. What would be the first steps?
It's interesting that you use the word daunting because I would say on 90% of my calls with potential clients who are looking to join one of our courses, that word comes up. It's really common to feel that way, that it's really overwhelming. There's so much paperwork involved.
Mm,
A lot of the time in construction, with the guys that we're working with, they've gone into a construction apprenticeship because they don't love the idea of loads of paperwork and loads of study, etc. Obviously not always, but that's a kind of common story for our guys. And then they start a company and then they do really great and they've got lots of business now. But doing this actually tendering part's a bit of a different story. So firstly, I would say you can break it down step by step. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't feel daunted. There's lots of ways that you can kind of get help. So even for us, like we've got a YouTube channel at the Tender Trainers, and there's loads of free videos on there. You can jump on and take a look and learn a few things. But I would say step by step, the fear is going to stop you, and the fear is going to make it seem worse than it is. So if you can kind of try and just put that to one side and say, right, I'm going to work through this really methodically, step by step. In terms of getting, I guess, your first tender opportunity, that's often a big one. So there's portals that you can look at for public opportunities. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn and saying to put yourself out there on LinkedIn and make it clear that you're keen to go for opportunities with companies. And there's quite a few also companies that do like lead generation, for example. So there's quite a few different ways that you can go about getting yourself onto lists to start to get the tenders in. So that's the first hurdle. And then once you've overcome that and you're starting to get tender opportunities, it's really just going through step by step the process, trying to get clear on what they want. And just to, I guess, take a step back, you said, what is tendering? Like what's the context? So it's it's the moment where obviously like the pure what it is that you've got, say, a main contractor coming out and saying, we want to bring people in to do the work, we've got an electrical package, we're going to go out to, it's usually really common to go out to about 5 companies expecting to get about 3 tender returns back, and then we're going to assess them and then we're going to see who's the best to come on in and do the work for us. There's a really common perception out there, which I don't feel is true, wasn't true in my experience of working for companies such as Mason Multiplex, that it's always one on price and it's always a race to the bottom. I don't personally believe that. I know that may be true for some main contractors. The way that I see tendering is this is your moment. It's kind of like dating, right? Like this is your moment to come in and say, are we a match or aren't we a match for both sides? And this is your chance to say, to kind of like showcase yourself and the reasons that you can really undertake the work properly. I feel that where there's a bit of a misconception around tendering and too much focus on price takes away from the point that what do main contractors actually want. In
mm,
my career, tendering, I did a lot of procurement of packages for these large main contractors for large projects. And what I was looking for as a quantity surveyor was to bring in the person who, yes, for the right price, but who I could trust to get the work done. Because at the end of the day, if they went bust halfway through, they couldn't complete the works for some reason, there was a lot of rework, quality was poor, that was going to end up costing us a lot more overall. So I know that was quite a long answer there, Vish, but I hope that's kind of covered off briefly the
yeah.
tendering piece.
So I want to go into something which I believe has stopped. Well, actually, no,
Mm.
I'm naively going to believe it stopped. But what's your opinion of this? The big brown envelope. Does that still actually happen? Are companies getting across projects by backhanders and things like that. Because I've been in the industry 15 years now, and I know it happens in councils. I know it happens even maintenance managers are doing it. But is that starting to kind of crack down and kind of go, look, this is not going to happen anymore? Or is it, you're my mate, I'm going to give you this project, you're going to buy me a, you know, I don't know, a boat. I don't
I
know.
mean, you've answered it yourself. You know that it's happening. I know that it's happening. Yeah, of
Mm,
course, that's still there and it's still present. It's something I don't feel. I'm like quite straight down the line. I don't feel very comfortable with it. I would always, all of our guys know, would never advise to go down that route ever. Yeah, but it's very present, isn't it, in construction? So yes, that's there. There's lots of corruption in lots of different ways within corruption, within construction at all different levels. I
mm,
definitely feel that that's starting to be cracked down on. We saw what happened with the collusion with various demolition contractors a couple of years ago, 2022, I think that was, and the huge fines that they faced, millions of pounds, because they were colluding on tenders. And I think we're going to start to see that kind of thing more and more. So I do feel that we're moving away from it. I don't personally, I would never want to see any companies that I work with get caught up in that type of thing. It might seem like it's an easy way to get work, but in the long run, you can really burn yourself. You can really end up facing a lot of fines. You can end up in the kind of shady side of, the construction industry. And it's not, for me, I think, I also feel it takes away from some of the satisfaction of
mm,
winning because you're the best. And
yeah.
so it's definitely present. We both know that it is. I do hope the industry will bit by bit move away from that. And I don't feel that if you choose not to engage with that it impacts you as a business. It might impact some of your quick wins,
Mm.
but I don't think it's going to take away from a long-term steady stable business that you can be proud of. So that's my
Absolutely.
perspective.
I also feel as if companies are taking it a bit more seriously now. When you enroll into a company, you do an e-learning course on bribery and all the rest of it.
Hmm.
Even the small things, like I remember, God, a couple of years ago, I started working for a company, and one of their e-learning was I was an electrician going to people's houses, and it was
Hmm.
you can't take gifts, you can't accept anything other than a compliment. So I think that's really, really good, really, really healthy.
That's really sweet. Other than a compliment.
I added that bit in because you gotta love a compliment every now and then.
Totally.
But I thought it was really, really fascinating because I do believe bribery still happens. And I think it actually, like you said, I think it's detrimental to businesses because
Yeah.
if for whatever reason that main builder goes out of business or the managing team decide to walk away because of retirement or whatever, where does that leave the company? Because the company who has been getting the bribes will then be out of work unless if they're doing it to loads of different people. Do you think that's sort of what happens?
I think it can happen at all different kind of levels. And I think that one thing that it can open you up to as well is if you have, say, an arrangement like that with someone who isn't like particularly senior, for example, that if you have a case where the company, say it's a tier one main contractor, decides, look, we've heard that there's a bit of, backhanders going on or whatever, and we're going to crack down, that if you're one of the companies who's caught up in that could impact your relationship with that main contractor as well. So, yeah, I think it can put you in a bit of a precarious kind of place. It's a hard one. There's companies that will have kind of feel that they've won by doing it this way, isn't there? There's companies who will feel that they're kind of onto something. I don't personally feel it's a good long-term strategy. I think this kind of thing gets found out at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my perspective.
I've always got this saying, cheaters always get caught out. So yeah, that's really fascinating. But also, let's say right, you're a company which has got 10 people in their team. Let's say you're an electrical company, and you really want to start expanding and getting into, um, you know, getting involved with main contractors and start small tendering projects like maybe rewire 50 flats or whatever.
Hmm.
Obviously, LinkedIn and these lead generation platforms are, I guess, great starting points. But how do you create a tender? What is it? Like, is it you go there and do a huge survey? It's so confusing because it's a world that we're never taught about or learn about unless if
I
you're
know.
in it.
I know. I know, and I feel that it should be included in apprenticeships. You know, I've had some
Yeah.
conversations on LinkedIn around this, and there's different perspectives. I put a poll out a few months ago, but there's different perspectives on it because some people feel that, well, there's plenty of like electricians, for example, who are never going to want to go out and create their own business. So don't make them do it if they don't want to. But there's also a huge amount of you guys in the trades actually do start your own business. It seems to be quite a big proportion to me anyway, but maybe that's because I'm generally working with subcontractor directors, but it seems to be quite like an entrepreneurial bunch.
Yeah.
Tradies, yeah. So anyway, it should be being taught. These are the things I do. These are the steps I would take. When you receive a tender pack, that is a moment that a lot of people kind of get put off and they don't go any further, because sometimes, say it was for 50 rewiring or wiring 50 flats, right? You could receive 100 drawings for that. You could receive 20 different documents. And that's where people do get put off and they think it's too much paperwork. I don't understand it. I feel freaked out by this. I feel overwhelmed. I don't feel that I have the capacity. I've never been taught this. And then they think I'm not going to do it. And that's such a shame, you know, because always in life, I think, like, it's such a shame to me that people wouldn't take that step and grow because they feel that they might be a bit inadequate, when actually you can totally learn it. It just seems daunting, you know, I think a lot of things in life are probably like that. So what I would do is I would take a breath and I'd break it down. So when you first receive the tender, there's going to be really key information that you're going to want to get from it. So the first thing is, what's the absolute key information that I need? Where is it? Where's the project? What's the dates? What's the program dates? When do I have to return this tender by? How many people, you know, what's my resource? How many people would I need on it? And do I kind of have that? What's the scope? And do I have the capability? So the really basic high level stuff, because the first step is quick run through of it. Do I actually want to do this? Because if not, then let's get that over with and, you know, a quick half an hour run through the documents. So what we usually have with our clients is like a kind of like just a checklist in the background. You could just make it yourself on Excel or write it down in your notebook or whatever, just the points that I've just gone through. There might be one or two more that feel relevant for you. And then, do I want it? That's the first thing, right? Then if you do want it, the next step I would always do is try and get yourself to site. So it's a phone call to the QS. Now, sometimes these tenders, sometimes the person on the other line isn't that amenable to you coming and doing a site visit and engaging with them and so on. It's a little bit of a red flag to me if that's the case, depending on the scope and the type of project, right? Like, obviously, if they're still in the ground, then yeah, there's maybe not that much point in you going out and having a look, right? So it just does depend on where they're at and the type of scope, etc. But as a real generalization, I'd want to get to site. I want to meet the project manager, like meet construction site if you can, as well as the QS, for example, and start to bang out some of those questions, understand what the logistics are. Are you going to have access to the crane if that's appropriate? How are you getting into the site? Anything that you need to understand about the scope that might be a little bit unusual, a little bit hard. What's your kind of access going to be like? Are there going to be other trades on site at the same time? Anything like that you need. And when you get onto site, you know this yourself, when you get onto site, it's such a different, you can start to build it in your head. You're going to put together a different tender. So that's the next step. I'll be trying to get to site. And then as quickly as you can, going out to any subcontractors to get prices from them. So you're an electrician, say the security package was in there as well, for example, fire alarms, what have you. You may be going out to others to get that in. So I'd be straight out to them as quickly as you can, probably potentially even before the site visit to start the conversation, because if they're going to take 2 weeks to return it, that can really delay things. So that would be one of the first things. And then it's just going through and methodically saying, right, firstly, have they given me a pricing schedule that I'm going to fill in, or do I need to do it? And then it's just methodically going through and saying, how much cable do I need? How many sockets do I need? How many guys do I need? And we price everything from first principles. I'll always encourage you to do this. So we don't price based on rates. You can turn them into rates and submit that to your client, but we always price from first principles. That means that you build up your labor, plant, materials, overhead and profit. And then you can convert it into rates if you want to, if that's the way the client wants to see it or that's the way you want to price it. But you know exactly what was in your price, and you can sense check it, and you can make sure that everything is really solid. And that's how you get really clear on your numbers. And then just the last part of that. So that piece, a lot of the time people might use freelance QSs for, right, which is totally fine. We also teach that. We teach that estimation piece. But regardless, as a subcontract director, you want to know your numbers. So even if you're using a freelance QS, I'd be asking them, please price on first principles, and making sure that you're really locked into what you've priced, because how can you manage it through to getting profit if you don't fully understand it? And then the final piece is a really professional submission. So you're going to have a really nice cover letter. You're going to maybe put some case studies in. You're going to return it in such a way that it's easy for the client to understand what you've priced. And then just good contact throughout. So then you call them and you say, hey, I've just submitted the tender. Have you got it? Have you got any questions? Just really trying to work that relationship piece all the way through. It doesn't have to be super complicated. There's some technical things that you have to learn. But yeah, it's not. And as I said, there's a lot of videos on our YouTube. So if anyone's kind of wanting one piece of that, you can probably find it if you want to jump on and take a look, which is at the Tender Trainers.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll put a link in the bio so people can just click the link and go
Nice.
straight onto it. It's not a problem at all.
Cool.
I want to touch on this because I'm neurodiverse, so I've got ADHD and OCD. Now, when I come across, so I did get an opportunity when I had my first company to tender for 12 flats to be rewired in Islington.
Yep.
And you're absolutely bang on when you said people get overwhelmed. I got overwhelmed. I got like loads of paperwork, loads of PDFs. I looked at it and I went, nah, forget that. But you're so right. If I just broke that down into property by property by property, done the viewing, figured out exactly what I needed to do, it wouldn't have been that difficult. So I guess you're right. It is all about breaking it down and just taking it as manageable steps. But here's another question. Do companies, because I'm hearing this a lot right now, do companies actually make a profit on these huge projects, or is it they just bounce from project to project to project, just making it? Because when I look at construction projects, I'm like, the money in construction is unbelievable. It's in the billions. But are subcontractors actually making good money from tendering these big projects?
Depends on the subcontractor. So it's a good question. It's a relevant question. I think there's a few different parts to this, but
Yeah.
let's jump in. So one part is something that we see really commonly when people first start to work with us is, right, this is a quite a normal setup, right? Is you may even have people kind of commercially working on your projects, etc., or you may have a director, say, especially in the early, say less turning over less than 5 mil, for example. A lot
Mhm.
of the clients we work with are turning over up to around 12 mil at the moment. So we've got that's the smaller section of the market. But a lot of the guys that we work with, they may have, this is a common conversation that we have. They're like, I'm not really sure what's going on. I get to the end of the financial year and the accountant's telling me I'm not making profit, or I just don't really know until they tell me. So we're not always great in construction at you have to know project by project if you're
Mhm.
making profit. So there's a couple of things happening. So one question is, do the subcontractors know? Do they have clarity? Because if you don't know if you're making profit, you don't know why you're not making profit, or why
Yeah.
you are, why you did on this job, how you can repeat it, how you can avoid mistakes on this one. And that's really one really key driver for us, is this clarity around money. Because
Mm.
when you don't have the clarity and things are a bit confusing, and then you don't really know what's happening with cash flow, and then you're having sleepless nights, and then
That's
you're
it.
falling out with a client because you're not really sure if you're making profit or not, or why you're not making profit. And it's all of that can happen. And one thing we're really interested in is relationships and money, the two together.
Yeah.
And tendering, we also work with clients right through the commercial piece, right? But tendering, and also the commercials, but tendering is just starting a relationship. And then all the way through, you get to kind of hopefully manage that relationship well. And if you manage it well, and you manage your money well, and you also, do really good record keeping and stuff like
Mm.
that, then you can have a good result. So the first question is, do subcontractors know? The answer is a lot of the time, honestly, no, they're not clear project by project. That's different for the larger ones, where they're more likely to have a team of QSs who are managing this and who are on top of it. But when you have smaller subcontractors, say in the early, turning over the early mills and below, then less so. Okay, second one is, I guess the question is, can you make money? You know, that question's in there, right? And the answer is yes, you can. But I understand why people would feel that maybe that's not always the case. It's risky. There's risk involved. And there's also a culture of saying, well, we'll just discount it so we can get in with this client and then we'll see what happens. Well, we lost on this one, but we'll win on the next one. And then you don't win on the next one. And there's all these kind of things happening. I feel that subcontractors, this is the way that we work with our clients, have honestly a bit of a responsibility to go, right, relationships super important, but also like profit first. Like if we're not making profit, we can't keep running this company, we can't keep paying our guys. So let's make sure that we've got profit in our mind with everything we do, not just get the next bit of pipeline in, but are we pricing responsibly? Are we thinking about risk? Do we have a really good QS checking through the contract to see if our terms and conditions are going to put us in a bad position or not? So I think that there's the industry can be hard and can be challenging. You definitely can make money. I'm all about advocating for kind of the subcontractors taking some responsibility to make sure that that's their story as much as they can. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I want to also go on to the mental health side of the podcast as well. And that is, I think you've touched on a really good point there, and that's money. Money is obviously a huge mental health issue within the construction industry. Payment terms are absolutely ridiculous. What is the industry actually doing, in your opinion, to tackle these late payment? Like we're talking like 60, 90, 120 days. What do you feel? Where do you think it's going wrong? Why do you think these payment terms are so delayed? Do you think it's just companies being horrible, or is it that their clients ain't paying them, like investors or whoever it is?
No, it's tactical generally. So if we have, there's two things here, right? So one is where you have defined payment terms that are, say, 60 days.
Okay.
And 60-day payment terms, it doesn't mean that you're paid 60 days. So say you have 5 guys on site today, you're not paid 60 days from today. You might be paying your guys on Friday, but or next Friday, whatever. But they're not. It's not 60 days from today or 60 days from when you pay them. It's 60 days from when you put your
Invoice them.
certificate in, and then exactly from when you put your application, then it's certified, and then you get an invoice. So that could be 30 days from today. So that's how it could become. Even 60-day payment terms become like 90 days, right? Now, when that's baked in, firstly, try not to agree to those terms.
Yeah.
If you can help it, right? But I know that sometimes, you might really want the project, and the main contractor, for example, might be like, there's no way, like, this is just what our terms are. Like, so that's how that can kind of end up happening. But if you're in that position, the other thing I'd say is, do you have, for some of the bigger types of material, like, for example, if you're bringing on plant, can you get it agreed that plant is going to be paid up front? Because sometimes you can negotiate that into a contract.
Okay.
So, sometimes there's a bit of mitigation, and it's the type of thing I'd totally be trying to negotiate back to 30 days, for example, if those were the payment terms in the contract. So that's not really late payment, I guess. That's just defined payment terms that are a bit unfair.
Sorry, Eve, I want to
unfair.
quickly jump in there.
Yeah.
So just to understand this, because I've never experienced this, so let's say a company says we've got 30-day payment terms, and that's obviously you invoice it, let's say beginning of January, you should be expecting that paycheck probably beginning of February. But if they've got a 30-day process to actually even accept the invoice, does that mean there's automatically a 60-day payment term? Because,
Basically, yes,
oh
because
wow, I
exactly.
didn't know that.
Because the difference is, like, so if you go and do some work, first you probably put the invoice in like that week, right?
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
how onto it you are with your invoices, but the
Hmm.
OCD probably helps. Just teasing.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine you're quite, like, potentially quite structured with it. I'm not sure. But so say you get your invoices in that week,
Hmm.
then, and you had 30-day payment terms, then you're 30 days from Friday, say.
Hmm.
But yeah, what you have on big, like, construction sites where you have a main contractor process, you have an application process. So that process is, you need to say, it's set out in the contract. So if you're not sure, you can always find it within the contract. It will say what the process is. Generally, it'll be something like on the 15th of each month to submit an application for the previous like month's work, right? Every now and then you can get a little bit of forecast in there. It's unusual. Some contracts have that, but usually you're kind of just going for the last 30 days. So if that was the case, you've kind of said, right, this is how many men I had working, or this is how much work we completed. You fill in the application accordingly. You submit it to the quantity surveyor. So that would be myself working for a main contractor. I receive that, and then I'm going through it and I'm like, Vish, you said this is done, but it's not done. I'm going to take that out. You've claimed for 50% of your prelims, but you guys have only been on site for 30% of the program. So I'm going to knock that back. And you have these kind of like, you have a checking exercise, I guess you could say. This is an area that, where subcontractors can get really frustrated is if this isn't communicated well, for example, because in an ideal world, I'd then call you and say, Vish, why did you put 50% in? Like, this is 30% based on this. And then you might say, well, I actually based it on this calculation and this is the way I was thinking. And we might agree to meet in the middle on 40%, for example, right? Or I might be quite like, no, absolutely not. This is how we approach it. This is what it says in the contract. I'm doing it at 30%, but at least you know. Another really common thing is like, can you provide evidence? So you've priced in that you've got an extra 6 guys came in on the Saturday on day works. I don't see them on my system. Can you show me that this has been signed off? Can you kind of prove this basically? If I don't have good communication with you, I might just dock it and then I might just send you a certificate. And the certificate you might have put in for £100,000 a month, and the certificate might say that I'm going to pay you £68,000. And then you're going to probably get furious because you're like, now I have to wait for this. So that application process is kind of the difference. That once you apply to me, I complete a certificate telling you how much I'm going to pay and I send it to you. You take that certificate and you create an invoice off the back of it and you submit it back to me. And then once you've invoiced, then it's like, say, 60 days from the invoice, or 60 days is a long term. I would say 30 days is a more standard process. But from the first day of the payment period that you paid your guys and you had materials and whatever, it could be 60 days to payment.
So when you're starting off in the whole process, how much money do you think a contractor should have in the bank before expecting that first paycheck from the main builder?
Oh, that is such a good question. That is such a good question, and I don't have an easy answer, and it makes me think maybe I should, but I'll just give you some thoughts. Firstly, cash flow forecast. So we always do this at tender stage with our clients. It's something that you could do yourself with an Excel spreadsheet and just mark out what you think you're going to get the program, when things are complete, and how much the materials. You could do it super broadly. You could be like, I think 50% of the material is going to have to be on site in the first month. And then I think, you could just do it quite broadly and then get from that an idea of how much money you're going to need in month 1, how much money you're going to need in month 2, etc. And that way you can kind of follow it through too. Cash flow forecasts, talking about mental health and construction and money, cash flow forecasts, a good clear cash flow forecast, being on top of it. It's the type of thing you can't usually rely on your accountant for, let's be honest. They're awesome at what they do, but they're not going to help you proactively manage, most likely, your money. So having a really good cash flow forecast, tracking it through, getting help to do that if you need it, that's going to allow you to sleep better at night, honestly, and feel in control of things and, have a robust business. Like, so many businesses going into liquidation, and sometimes it's out of your hands, but there's also some simple things you can do to kind of protect yourself. So that's the big thing I'd say. And the other thing is there are things like invoice financing, etc. There are companies that will lend you money to get started if you need that for capital. So they're present too.
Because that's really interesting.
Be careful on the payment terms.
Yeah, 100%.
Interest and stuff.
Because that's the bit that would throw me. Because if I was to go into a big, huge project, in my head, I'm instantly like, okay, there's going to be late payments. There might be these QSs who are going to be not difficult, but doing their job. And on top of that, in my head, I'm like, okay, so I feel like I would need 6 months' money to really be safe and secure because if there's delays, blah blah blah, gonna have to pay for materials, gonna have to pay the guys if they're weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, however they want to be paid, etc., etc. 6 months feels like a really healthy bank balance to have, because then you can go off and do other little jobs that to keep you on float. But God, 6 months money for a huge project could be in excess of 50, 60, 100 grand cash. And
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of construction companies my size, or even 10-man team, have that just cash sitting there. So I can see why small contractors are so scared to level up and go into that field. It's
I can
scary.
too. I can
Yeah.
too. And I don't think it's I think you have to be a little bit hungry and a little bit keen for the risk. Like a little bit, you need
Yeah.
to protect yourself. I don't think it's something you should go into blindly and just say, oh, everything will be fine. Because actually, there is a lot of challenges. Like that's just the absolute truth. Protecting yourself through getting clear on knowledge, getting some people in your team on your side. People have been there, done that. Get don't don't do it blindly. I
Mm,
definitely say that. And then the other part is not everyone's going to have the appetite for that type of risk.
yeah.
If I was to go and set up a company right now, would I have the appetite for it? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm honestly not sure. So it's not we don't have a, especially at the moment, like we're going to come into boom again in construction, it always does, but it's a little bit tough times right now. So understanding that there's risk. The biggest thing I could say, and this is not something we do ourselves, but we have, Russ from, I'll just shout out, Russ from Support. We send a lot of our guys to him for contract reviews. And the biggest thing you can do, this is what I would say to everyone, is get yourself a contract review, because it's so easy to get tripped up where you're locked into a contract where you don't fully understand what you signed up to,
Yeah.
and kind of get yourself into hot water. But you can definitely do it like through, I know what you're saying about the 6 month thing. It makes sense as a business owner to give yourself that kind of space. But as you say, most companies won't have that. So that's where things like lenders finance, etc., come in, invoice finance.
Point I'd like to touch on, because I know we've spoken quite a lot about the tendering side, but something that's quite, I believe, interesting to talk about is being a female in construction.
Mm,
And are you comfortable talking about that?
sure.
How do you find it as a QS, which is quite a high role in construction? You're on site, you're also talking to the senior members of the team. How do you find it? How do you cope? What are the challenges, and how do you find it?
Well, for the most part, I love it, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got five brothers. I love men. I love being around men.
Yeah.
So, for the most part, I quite enjoy it. I enjoy being in a masculine environment. I'm pretty good with it.
Mm,
It's really interesting starting on site. So, it makes me laugh. Like I'll usually go through, and not at the time, it's really annoying, but I'll usually go through, it's often about 3 months where the guys, it depends on the site, right? Sometimes you work on a site for a large main contractor and there's three other women in the office and it's normal.
mhm,
Sometimes I've worked on sites where I'm the only woman. I worked for a company where there was about 100 of us and I was the only professional woman. We had a couple of admin ladies and then we had me,
mhm.
So it took the team a bit of time to get their head around me being a woman who was there working with them, which is quite funny in this kind of day. This is going back about not nearly 10 years probably, but it's quite funny in this kind of day and age, right, to have that happening. I do quite often go through this like learning period, so it'll be like 3 months where there's kind of an assumption, especially you might have some older guy like construction managers and stuff, and I'll come onto site super bubbly, like happy,
Yeah.
talking about my kittens, whatever, and they'll think, oh my goodness, who's let her on site? And it takes a minute because I don't, I don't, I'm not usually trying. I don't do a lot of trying to be super Mrs. Construction or whatever. I'm just like, here I am.
Mm,
And then about 3 months in, so I'll get a lot of flack during that time. Maybe they'll try and get me to, go and do the laminating for them, or they'll give me a lot of flack, or, I won't be invited to the pub. I'll go through this period of time for about the first 3 months. And then at some point it clicks in and they're like, oh, she knows what she's doing. And then,
okay.
after a minute, it'll be like, Eve, we've got this problem on site. Can you come out and what do you think we should do? And I'm like, yes, you've got it. We're back. You understood. We got there, and it
Oh,
will make me really happy. But usually, the best relationships I have is I've worked with some awesome construction managers who like know their stuff inside out, and they will teach me everything about construction that I want to know, because, you know, as a QS, we can be quite general. Like when we're working for main contractors, you'll look after 10, 15 packages sometimes, you know. And so working with guys who will come in and say, come out to site, I'll show you, and they'll teach me how things are built, and it's like the best. And then I'll have their back commercially. So I'll make sure I get instructions out quickly, that I understand things, that I help them understand what's happening in the contract. And so for me, those are just the absolute best relationships. But yeah, so generally I find it pretty good. But like, let's bear in mind, like I'm coming up to 40. I'm not a spring chicken. I started in construction when I was about 29, 28, 27. So I wasn't super young either. Like I'd already, you know, had a bit of life experience. And I have had difficult experiences at times. Like I really have had experiences that are very gendered, very sexist, like horrible, horrible experiences that you wouldn't think would happen. So I've had that happen too. But the thing is that I really know how to stick up for myself. So that helps a lot. It's something that, you know, I find like I've been invited to go and speak to women about coming into construction, for example, girls, you know, at schools, and it's something that I choose not to do because I'm not sure. I'm not sure about it. I think you do have to be able to come in and actually like, and it, you know, it's probably the same for men, to be honest, in construction. You do have to be able to kind of like hold your ground a bit, because it can be a really tough environment. You have to be quite resilient, and I haven't always been very resilient. You know, I have had times where it's just been really hard. So I would say overall a bit of a mixed bag, but like I love it. Like I love construction. I love the masculine environment. So I don't think it's not always been a positive experience in construction, but like it's not always been because of my gender either.
Yeah, completely understand. Well, it's really interesting. If there is one thing you could say to young people who do want to join construction, what's one thing you would say?
I would say it's a career where you can have a serious impact. Like it, I guess I'm talking about the professional side of things, project management and QSing, etc., because that's what I've done. I don't feel there's so many careers that you come in and you as an individual being a part of that team can really change the outcome of that project. You know, and just to add in, this is interesting to me because I actually don't feel that's always the way for the guys on site. I don't feel that they're always maybe encouraged to feel that their input is. So I just want to recognize that that's there. But yeah, I feel that if I come in and I'm switched on and I know my stuff commercially and I've got good relationship skills and I work well with subcontractors and I work well with the project managers and I've got a lot of get up and go, I can impact the actual outcome of like building a large, you know, project in central London. And how many jobs do you have where you get to feel that? It's something really special. I definitely wouldn't put young people off construction. I do sometimes worry about the young women coming in because I just think if I'm not there to stick up for them, then I don't know if I should be telling them to come on in. Do you know what I mean? But if you're quite resilient and you want to really make a difference within a team and also learn some skills that you can take quite far in other directions. It doesn't always have to be within commercial construction, for example. Learning how to run projects commercially, learning project management, learning engineering, all of these things can go on to, you know, you can go on to do some real good in the world actually through those things as well. Let's say post-career, for example. Yeah, I think it's an incredible career, chance to travel. There can be quite good money to be made in construction. Lots of overseas opportunities in various places, to Australia, parts of Asia, etc. Yeah, there's
That's
lots
really
there.
interesting because a recent statistic I read was that nearly half of apprentices actually drop out of the industry before completing. So I think hearing that message is actually quite refreshing for young men and young women who want to come into industry, which I think is absolutely key. Because we need more people, we need more workforce. I think there was a recent stat said we need over 250,000 more workers in the next 3 years just in UK to actually focus and complete the demand we have. So yeah, I think that's really fascinating. But one last topic I'll touch on is QS. From everything you've said today, it sounds so stressful. How do you manage all of that stress? Because not only are you managing people's money, you're also managing their teams, you're managing the project, you're managing your, senior people coming in saying we need X, Y, and Z completed. The mental health struggles on that must be quite extreme.
There's a shortage of 6,000 kids in the UK, and we're one of the
Wow.
highest paid people on the projects, if not the highest. So
Wow.
you'd think that it would be something that people are going for, and they're not, and that's why.
Wow.
So I guess that's the answer. I mean, it's a really stressful job. Um, Oh, there's so much that I think about this. I don't think it's a lot of the time not the QS's fault what's happening commercially on the project. So, for example, you may be falling out with subcontractors because you are really tight on the contract with them, but you're there trying to make money, profit on the project. I'm talking about main contract side QSs, and there may have been some agreements made at tender stage that mean that you don't actually have, the money in the project to say run it like it should
Yeah.
be run, for example. So it is a really stressful job. The skills that you can learn are so good, so good for life. There's such good skills to have to understand how money works, understand how to manage money. That they can be utilized in so many different industries. I think, unfortunately, people who are quite finance minded, I could go and work in finance for the banks. I could make a huge amount of money and huge bonuses. I could go and sit on a construction site, get yelled at by subbies and
Yeah.
drink terrible coffee. Which one am I going to choose? So
Of course.
it is actually a really stressful job. Some of that stress, if you work on your relationship skills and you work on having strong relationships, some of that stress can, I think, be mitigated.
Hmm.
Which is the reason I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course.
I did it for 10 years, and I may go back to it at some point. You never know. I really quite miss projects, but it is really stressful being a quantity surveyor for sure.
Gosh. Yeah, it sounds it, to be fair. It really does sound it. But Eve, it's been such a pleasure having you on. I want to say thank you so much for your time. So you love what you guys are
Thanks.
doing.
Oh,
And
thanks,
yeah,
Vish. I
no
appreciate the
worries.
opportunity, and likewise, super love what you're doing with Onward Shift. And yeah, just
Cheers.
as you know, totally wishing you all of the best of luck with it. I'm really keen on the mission. I think it's amazing. And
Cheers. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Honestly, the more people we reach, the more support we can offer. And don't forget, Onward Shift isn't just a podcast. We've got a number of resources on our website, so please don't forget to check out www.onwardshift.com, where you'll find counsellors, keynote speakers, coaches, blogs, and so much more. Until next time, don't forget to keep having these important conversations.